We're jumping in with some competitive board gaming tactics. Now, for me, board gaming is entirely social. Whatever the system, whatever the game is that we're playing, I love to sit down with some friends, either in terms of a co-op, or if it's a one against many, or if it's a strategy game where we're each vying for control of the board, and roll those dice, flip the cards, have some fun, create a narrative. But there are those games that are competitive where I want to do my best to win, not at the expense of the other players or the game experience, but in creating that memory, right? In creating that moment, I want to put my best tactica forward. Now, if you've been following some of my other board gaming exploits, you know it's about tabletop glory. You know I'm going to go for it. I have to if there's a chance for something. But I'm aware of that. You're like, Fritz, that's a crazy move. Why'd you do that? Because look, the chance to take this city, like I had to go for it. I had to risk everything. I'll do that, right? It's like chaotic neutral. I'll just risk anything in any moment. But I'm aware of what I'm doing. So I say that as a framework because I'm approaching this tactica purely beast mode, purely competitive play, because maybe you're playing that game where you need to win. Talisman is a board game that I really, really enjoy. I play it with a variety of groups. One group, we get together 3 or 4 times a year for a big game, and it is no holds barred, winner takes all. You better win, or you better come close to winning, because then you're going to hear about it for months until we play again. And then other times, there's board games that by their very nature, you want to bring the win. So within that framework, first thing I look at, and I ask myself, are we on a timer? Are we on a timer? Certain board games, there's a timer, meaning you're restricted to X number of turns. An example of this would be Runebound, 3rd edition. You have a timer on the side of the board where after all the players have made their moves, it advances by 1. At certain points, quests will refresh. At certain points, a narrative card will flip over, and you read it, and something happens in the realm. After it makes it through one entire cycle on the timer, the monsters become more potent. After it makes it through the second time, the boss monster activates, and now you're in the end game, whether you're ready or not. Another example of a timer, so that's an example of a visible timer. An invisible timer, Zombicide, Black Plague, Invader, fantastic games, love them. This idea, when you start out, there are no zombies, there are no invaders, but every turn you flip cards at spawn points. Now it's random. You might get 3 walkers, you might get a runner, you might get a worker if it's a invader. But gradually more and more and more zombies or invaders are going to spawn. And what's going to happen at a certain point is the table is just going to become absolutely flooded. I set up all the Zombicide or Invader miniatures to the side. I set them out ahead of time. And players, they look, if you've never played the game before, you're like, wow, this looks pretty cool, man. Zombies and stuff, like, wow, look at all these miniatures. Well, you're not going to use all those, right? No, like those are going to be like halfway through the game used. It gets insane with the flood. Talking about on a side note, this would never happen because there's too many players that want those cash grabs. But you want to talk about a new edition of Zombicide? Halo edition. Think about that. To play Master Chief, to play a Spartan, to play the elites, to play those, and you could be like on Halo or Halo 2 or Halo 3, another Halo ring, and the flood are escaping, and you have to navigate that. Both co-op, maybe Covenant and Earth Forces, or just like head to head with the flood going. That, whatever the price of admission for that is, I would totally, absolutely buy in. But anyway, as an example of competitive board game play, those are timers. I need to look at a timer and say, I need to be efficient every single turn because things are going to become more and more difficult. Another invisible timer, you're playing Game of Thrones and we're trying to capture territories. There's a set number of territories, but every turn they're going to become less and less and less as players grab them. And to take them from a player means we're going to have to invest resources. So what is the most efficient way of leveling up? What is available? within that timer. That's what I'm going to go for. An example like Runebound, yeah, I want that amazing magical axe that's all the way on the other side of the board that's 14 gold pieces. Well, if I go on a quest, there's a chance to get 1 or 2 gold, and if I fight monsters, there's 1 or 2 gold. Plus, it's going to take time to go there. By the time I get that axe, like, it'll look great on my character. It'll look heroic. But by the time I get that axe, I will have burned the entire first act of the game. It's not worth it. From competitive play, narrative play, yeah, sure. I want to look heroic with the axe. I would be better off staying in my region, kind of gobbling up and getting synergy of war gear and magic items that are available. So looking at your resources and understanding, turn 1, are you on a timer? Now, other games might be open-ended where it's just a victory condition, right? First number of players to control 5 cities. That could be in like 4 or 5 hours. That could be like in 10 hours. Depends on what's going on. Resource management, yes, absolutely important. But now, understanding player personalities, understanding building alliances, understanding working trades and things like that. Being able to walk a fine line. There was a time where we just played settlers like crazy, just kind of mad settlers. And I got pretty good at it. I guess if it was like, if we were going to sit down to not play poker and we had to play a game where I could like bet something on it and maybe actually win, I'd say settlers. This idea of resource management and when to do it, there are times, understanding the players that you're with, and we're going to talk about that, how if you don't know the players, what to do. There were times where I just wouldn't trade anything, even if it was advantageous for me, because the chaos that created and what it possibly revealed. Some people needed, whatever they needed in terms of resource cards. So they're making me desperate or sweet deals. That gave me insights into their plans, insight into what they want. But it was a fine line to walk where if I'm not going to trade or make any alliances, because then that's going to just drive them to other players to make alliances or trade, and now I'm going to have those players against me. Or someone's going to become just pissed off and be like, I'm just going to go after Fritz. Like, he doesn't want to trade? Okay, I'm going to try and take everything rather than being open. So there's this fine line in building resources and seeing how things work out versus not trading at all. The idea of trying to get an idea of what your opponents are going to do is very, very important in competitive games. Perhaps the most important aspect of it. Meaning, what we're looking at, I've got my resources, I've got my plans. I don't want to necessarily go where the other players are going, or I don't want to get bogged down in competing to try and grab some territory, and that burns 2 or 3 turns. So putting stuff out there as feelers. Putting out there, hey, let's make an alliance. I'm not planning to make an alliance. If you do, I'll work with you. If I don't, that's okay. I'll go on my own. I don't make plans saying I need to make an alliance with this person. Only with certain very, very brief exceptions. On a side note, there are certain friends that I sit down with to play where we're making an alliance. I'm not naming names because you could be listening to this vlog. I love you guys. But certain players I can't lose against. That can't happen. I get texts at 3 a.m. I get memes. I get all this stuff. Like, no. So I'm sitting down and it's like, oh, we're sitting down together. I'm making an alliance against you. There's been a couple of times I'm sitting down with frenemies and I'm like, I need to make an alliance with you because I can't lose to my best friend. And they're like, well, but I hate you and I dislike you and that's your best friend and you want to go against him. Like, look, you don't understand. Like, we need this alliance, right? So there are times where you need to do things, but outside of that, not going in planning to make an alliance or not, and putting those opportunities out there. And by alliances, it could be like, hey, look, we're right next to each other, our 2 kingdoms. You want to, get married and team up and just go and trash everything. Or it could be, I've got these resource cards. Let's see what they want. I'll throw some stuff out there. See who bites, right? That's going to give you an idea of the other player's plans. Not only Now, this is the interesting part. I was a beast at Spartacus, man. That game, I love that game, just absolutely beast. There were certain gladiators, Crixus, right? Certain gladiators that I would always play. And other players, friends of mine, they want certain players and characters. This one player just wants one character and like has to have that character. So I would acquire that character, that support character early on and just sell them for ridiculous amounts of gold or just all sorts of crazy stuff, right? But this idea of when you make an offer, it's not binary as in like they accepted it or not. That's going to tell you something. But what is really going to tell you is how fast they accept it or not. Meaning if I make you an offer, and it's got to be a realistic offer. It's not like, look, dude, give me like a full hand of iron, wool, and clay and timber, and I'll give you like these 2 cards. Like no, it's got to be a reasonable offer or slightly better than average offer, right? Something for a player to actively consider it. When I make that offer, I don't have to, right? You make an offer to someone, competitive gameplay. They accept. You can say, you know what? Actually, I'm not going to do it. That's the thing. Now, you're going to burn bridges. You're going to piss them off. But it's not a done deal until the cards or the coins or something crosses hands. We're still in negotiation mode. Just because you accept, right? We're still negotiating. So it's a question of when you make the offer, how fast do they accept it? Meaning, if I make an offer to you and you're like, yeah, that sounds good. Or you're like, oh, interesting offer. No, thank you. If there's like a 3 or 4 or 5 second acceptance or rejected, that means it's part of your plans. You were already expecting something, or you've got something going on, overall strategy. And even though you weren't expecting an offer from me, it does not fit into that strategy. So sometimes I'll make offers of anything just to try and discover someone's strategy. You want this gladiator? I'll sell you the gladiator. See if they accept it or not. That tells me how they're trying to build their house, where they're trying to go, right? Build their stable. So different than if I make an offer to you, hey, I'll trade you this. Are you interested? And they think of it for a few seconds. If it's like 6 or 7 or 10 seconds, that means they're crunching the numbers. That means they don't have a strategy yet, or their strategy is still in development, or I'm not a part of their strategy, because they're like, well, okay, if I got this, then I could build an outpost there, and then, okay, that opens it up to that aspect, and I can build some roads going to here, and that'll open up the port, right? They're thinking ahead. That will show you and give you some ideas with strategy. Being able to do that is so, so important. But again, I started with a timer because you got to fit all of this in, all of this competitive play in the framework of that timer.